This is the now defunct Kawasaki Warehouse Arcade and Amusement Center in Kanagawa, Japan. Its theming was a nod to Kowloon walled city in Hong Kong, China, once the densest population place on Earth. These 14-story buildings were so closely packed that sunlight often could barely reach its labyrinth of alleyways and corridors below, and at its peak, approximately 35,000 people lived in only a little over 6 acres of land. Existing in limbo between Chinese and then occupied British colonial control, the city came to be neglected and unregulated, with rampant inhumane living conditions and poverty. However, these conditions created a tight-knit, self-reliant, if often lawless, community. The Triad Syndicate eventually came to be the de facto governing force in Kowloon, even creating fire departments and homes for the elderly, though all fueled by their drug trade, which of course didn't help to minimize disparity for its citizens. And in 1993, China and Britain united and moved against Kowloon's residents, and they were forcibly evicted, despite protests. By 1994, all of Kowloon was demolished and leveled. A city completely neglected and forced to survive, now forced to leave their homes by that same neglecting hand. A park now exists in the place where the walled city once stood. So why would anyone want to spend time in an arcade that's designed to look and feel like a city in squalor? How could this be a place you go to have fun, to relax with family and friends? Because when you think about it, Kawasaki Warehouse, designed to mimic the cramped alleys and squalor of Kowloon, is an odd, unsettling simulation of its subject matter. A once real place with families and businesses reduced down to a highly aesthetic simulation of dystopian ruin, filled with fun games and entertainment, a great time. Ironically, like Kowloon walled city before it, Kawasaki Warehouse also met its end, and in 2019, it completed its simulation when it was closed due to increasing rent costs. So how could this be a place you go to have fun, to relax with friends and family? Well, this is the power of theming, of creative and immersive environments. When seeing photos of Kowloon walled city, plenty of people recognize the aesthetic that's had an influence on cyberpunk, on dystopian imagery. Cramped quarters, dripping alleyways, dangling power lines, cracked and crumbling walls. All of this, when captured into the theme of an arcade, suddenly becomes invigorating, intriguing, exciting. A controlled environment, artfully crafted and curated. Your surroundings and environment as an art form. You know you're not really in a place of decay, you're in a place that was sculpted to appear that way. It's the theme. So there's more that needs to be said about the ethical implications of what it means to capture Kowloon's squalor as a form of themed entertainment, as a spectacle, or how theming has been used as a form of appropriation or fetishization. Think Tiki bar. But before we get to that, I have to feed you some propaganda about all the fun times you can have at amusement parks. The dark ride. Ever since the pretzel brand dark rides took off in the 1930s, but going all the way back to a trip to the moon and Luna Park at Coney Island, and the countless old mill rides like the one at Kennywood in the early 1900s, which were later known as Tunnels of Love after their reputation for... Ever since then, dark rides have been taking passengers on rides through dim-lit passages, small spaces packed with visual tricks, gags, audio immersion, and returning them right back into the light of the regular world in which they entered. For over a century, the dark ride has cemented its place in the history of amusement parks, and it's the dark ride that's at the core and heart of so many rides we have today, whether it's the Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man at Universal Islands of Adventure, the Calico Mine Ride at Knott's Berry Farm, or Dreamflight at Efteling in the Netherlands. The dark ride is the blueprint. The importance of the power of lighting is something I've always taken away from dark rides, carving light out of the darkness of an environment, controlling the lighting as a means to express emotion. It's not much different than the way a filmmaker utilizes light, determining the best contrast and values to insinuate sadness, tension, or euphoria. When you enter a dark ride, you're met with lighting designed to make you feel a certain way. You're expected to be met with an environment that's designed to transport you to somewhere else, another time, maybe even another dimension, depending on what the theme calls for. Theme parks have always found a soft spot in my heart. I grew up in Montana, but was fortunate enough to spend summers as a child with my grandparents in California, where they would take me and my sister to Disneyland. So I was exposed to theming at a young age. I was always in awe at the smell of the salty bromine waters and burning buildings of Pirates of the Caribbean, the adventure of facing the rattlesnake and dynamite-infested Old West gold mines of Thunder Mountain, or feeling the first sense of the macabre witnessing the dancing ghosts and apparition-filled graveyards of the Haunted Mansion. Shout out to Madame Leota. Disneyland was where my mind first became aware of theming, of what it is, how it can carry you off to unknown worlds, places of imagination, realized and concrete right in front of you. And looking back, I noticed how crucial this kind of creative environment was for my imagination, for my development, and in my opinion now, for how important creative and immersive environments in general are for society. And yeah, I know how freely the word immersion gets thrown around these days, trust me, I know. And I apologize, I'm gonna have to say it to you so many times, so I might as well put a little counter down in the corner every time I say it so I can really feel a sense of shame. Again, I apologize. We'll make it through though. Now, don't think I'm giving Disney some sort of pass. Disney, as a multinational corporate conglomerate, has one of the largest media companies on the planet who has its hands in so many aspects of our daily lives. Should not get away unscathed just because, like, the Indiana Jones Adventure, Temple of the Forbidden Eye is a clear world-class theme park attraction. And it is. It would be ridiculous to say otherwise. But I'm not here to champion Disney of all institutions as a current positive vehicle for societal change. Not at all. But it's undeniable that they've had a hand in advancing amusement park technology, theming, and immersive— oh, there it is already. Okay. Focus. But it's undeniable that they've had a hand in advancing amusement park technology, theming, and immersive and creative environments throughout the years, especially through Walt Disney Imagineering. And it's not just themed environments which stimulate that deep immersive part of your brain. I'm not saying every single restaurant should be Rainforest Cafe, but think of the soft glow of a dim and well-lit bar, the sprawling neon paradise, the Las Vegas Strip, or gaming arcades with their blacklight luminescence and endless cascade of blinking screens and lights. I also think old 80s malls are a good example of a sort of creative environment that doesn't necessarily rely on theming. As we all know, malls don't have to look like this. They don't need to be this inviting, this well lit. They don't need to dazzle you. They don't need to impress you or make you feel at ease. Again, we all know this. We all know what we're offered today. That's why we recognize that the malls of the past offered us something we don't have much of today: more creative, immersive environments. Because it's clear the option like capitalist neoliberalism has chosen for us: cheaper, quicker, less design, less workers, less wages, more profits. This is why even fast food chains like McDonald's used to have a more creative design aesthetic in their architecture and products compared to the soulless, cheap, and tacky cookie cutter styles of today. Throughout the 60s and through the 90s, companies were more willing to go that extra mile by not sacrificing on design, putting more care into the environment that, let's be real, consumers would be spending time in, because this too affects and influences that consumer's decision on whether or not they spend money at that company in that environment. Today, this has for the majority, at least I believe, been lost. As far as the eye can see, cheap and sterile construction, homogeneous and bleak, vibeless pits of minimalism, fluorescent nightmares. These are the environments that are often built today. When I'm in these environments, I feel the hollowness of late capitalism. I feel its bloodshot-eyed false smile welcoming me. How that playfulness and inventiveness has been sapped from society. How it can often tend to wash over you like a sedative. I want the world I move through to engage my mind in some way. Is that too much to ask? I want it to make me appreciate it. I want my environment to make me feel positive about human ingenuity. And I'm not just talking about stores and companies. I'm obviously talking about parks, libraries, and public spaces too. Everyone deserves spaces like Changi Airport or Gardens by the Bay in Singapore, but free and public. They shouldn't be limited to private spaces. We all deserve to be surrounded by environments like these, spaces that make us marvel, or spaces that make us feel relaxed, spaces that get our mind going. I really do think that there can be a restorative aspect to these kinds of environments. I think they have something to offer us as a society. The problem is our economic system doesn't prioritize this sort of thing. It prioritizes the wealthy getting wealthier. It prioritizes the military. It prioritizes profits. They have no concern for how you feel about your environment or how it affects you. I feel like some of these more creative environments would be seen as decadent by a lot of people. After all, this is due to centuries of equating these sorts of detailed environments with the upper crust, with having the funds to access these sorts of environments. And that's all true for the most part, and it reflects our economic system. Capitalism prioritizes these sorts of environments for the affluent or wealthy, so we've been conditioned to think of them as other. This couldn't possibly be for me, this must be for the rich. This is decadence. But to me, there's no reason to even see this as decadent if the workers who were involved in the creation and operation of the environment were paid livable wages. If the patrons frequenting these spaces are paid livable wages. These immersive environments do not need to equal bourgeois decadence. But they're seen that way because it's by design. Capitalism prioritizes profits, not people. Especially today, they couldn't care less about making creative environments. Right now, they've got their best and brightest minds trying to turn you into a paste which could run their AI slot farms, so no, for the most part it's just eat your burger and shut up. Now that I've mentioned burger, we can get back to Kawasaki Arcade and the topic of appropriation and theme. In the 1950s, the Tiki trend swept through white America. While it was an homage to and misplaced appreciation and celebration of Hawaiian and oceanic cultures, it was also a clear appropriation and fetishization, filled with beautiful smiling hula girls always ready to dance by your side, a beautiful flower lei for every happy patron, and shrunken heads on shelves to ogle at, despite shrunken heads never being a part of any oceanic culture at all. But you know, they're primitive, unrefined. They would obviously shrink human heads. No, in Tiki culture, there was no reflecting upon the colonization and oppression of the Hawaiian people, nor any oceanic culture, let alone a concern for or acknowledgement of it. This style of Tiki bar design became a sort of fake pastiche which redirected people away from thinking about the hyper-reality of the actual reality it appropriated. Of course, this fantasy world version of oceanic cultures clearly wasn't an accurate display of oceanic cultures. It was the culture interpolated through the eyes of the Western white American. But as pop culture has the ability to carve away at narratives, Tiki culture became more real than the real thing. It didn't matter that Tiki culture was clearly not oceanic culture. The cultural signs and symbolism and media literacy propagated around Tiki culture had already cemented in the minds of the public. This is Tiki. This is just like Hawaii. This is just like Polynesia. But it wasn't. It never was. This is the sort of notion of theming we need to move away from. Theming that simulates culture without concern, without care for media literacy. When it comes to Tiki, I understand there wasn't always malice in the people who enjoyed Tiki. They thought they were being harmless, having fun. Haha, nude hula girl serves me colorful drink, yum, and funny. But we have to reckon with these sorts of appropriation before we can go about course correcting these sorts of problems that we face with culturally themed environments. Because the very act of adapting, say, a culture's vernacular architecture, as in a culture's utilitarian architecture which uses only the resources of its immediate environment, the act of adapting that into a themed form of entertainment can evoke the feelings around colonial appropriation that many cultures have faced for centuries. And it's not to say this form of theming can't be done with more care and concern for the cultures the theme is based on. I think a good example of this is, ironically, look who it is, Disney's Animal Kingdom, and particularly the Himalayan-inspired roller coaster Expedition Everest. Under Imagineering veteran and guy I wouldn't mind looking like one day, Joe Rohde, he and his team traveled around Nepal and China spending time with the Himalayan cultures which they'd planned on incorporating into the ride. There was an acknowledgement that their cultures would, of course, while no doubt being filtered through an inevitable Western lens, even a corporate lens, but they would take precautionary steps to try to do right on behalf of those cultures. And though the ride's antagonist was the Yeti, a cryptid well known by Western audiences through pop culture of course, they incorporated actual mythologies and histories surrounding the Yeti they learned from monks and other locals into the ride, hired actual Nepalese craftspeople to work on artwork for the ride, and walking through the queue alone puts into perspective how much thought and intention went into this ride. I think Animal Kingdom in general is the most emblematic park Disney has ever created in terms of authenticity and consideration and theme. And in my opinion, it was Joe Rohde who was the keystone when it came to some of Disney's best and most culturally sensitive depictions during his tenure when it came to theming and storytelling. Animal Kingdom in particular is a good example of what could have been for Disney, a glimpse into something greater, where attention to detail includes not only the vernacular architecture of a building or visual realism, but detail in terms of consideration for the cultural richness of that themed interpretation, where theme parks aren't just about similarity or simulation, but also about education in some sense and true immersion. But that's not where Disney went, was it? No, Disney went somewhere else. Anyways, Joe Rohde doesn't work for Disney Imagineering anymore, and I think that says a lot. And yeah, obviously Disney itself has in its past clearly had some pretty questionable and sometimes downright racist depictions in their attempt to educate through themed entertainment. We have to recognize that, even if they were coming from what they might have thought was a genuine place of benevolence in their attempts. One day it's everyone loves Splash Mountain, have a zippity-doo-dah day, and the next it's suddenly, oh shit, everybody recognizes how racist this is, maybe it's time to acknowledge it. And this is what Animal Kingdom did a better job at avoiding exciting, even with its abundance and reliance on depictions of other cultures. So of course, I'm not saying everything about Expedition Everest or Animal Kingdom in general is perfect, obviously, but in its creation, more cultural sensitivity was implemented than in parks of the past, because while the effect is incredibly immersive, it still leaves plenty of room for interrogating the implications of theming and authenticity, such as the dilapidated buildings of the African section of Animal Kingdom. While the themed buildings themselves are based on and influenced by real structures in South Africa the Imagineering team saw while researching in Africa, what does that say about why they are like that? Why is the infrastructure crumbling? Why is the paint chipped and long faded? Why, when Disney Imagineers traveled around the world while studying and researching countries for Animal Kingdom, did they come across these things like crumbling infrastructure we now see in front of us?
When you go to our African village, there's mildew on the buildings and telephone wires and advertisements stuck on the wall. It has a very distinct sense of a history, of an economic status, of a political world in which it exists. It feels like a real place.
In its interpretation, in its simulation of authenticity, it holds a very real mirror up to the reality that the park's theming attempts to soften, if you're willing to look. Because in the end, it is theming. It is a simulation. It wants to present to you and immerse you in the reality it's chosen for you. Even the workers at Disney theme parks, they're all called cast members. A very deliberate choice to remind you you're in a world of make-believe. And although the park presents plenty to think deeper about when it comes to the theming of Animal Kingdom, it, on behalf of a multinational corporate conglomerate, remember, is still choosing the reality for you. Theme parks don't pretend to be reality. They openly invite the fact they exist outside of reality. They're a copy, a fiction. And hey, maybe you'll even believe it. Though Disneyland's Main Street, USA, with its perfectly clean streets and well-maintained picturesque buildings, in no way reflects the real thing outside Disneyland, it nonetheless tries to instill in you the feeling that, no, this is what America really represents. Not that out there, that's something else. And here, though, this is America. This is the happiest place on earth. Likewise, Disney's Animal Kingdom wants to present to you the idea that this is Nepal, this is India, this is Africa. Not that. Out there, that's a different Africa. In here, though, this is all I need to know. This is the Animal Kingdom. And this is the simulation. And we now live completely in a world of simulation. Everything around you is a simulation. Self-checkout kiosks are simulations of cashiers, social media is a simulation of community, self-driving, a simulation of driving, automation, a simulation of the worker, remote work, a simulation of the office, dating apps, a simulation of the meet cute. Everything which capital has carved out for you is a world of simulation. Because when you have access to the real thing, to real authenticity, to real comfort, you might ask for more. You might ask for security. You might ask for emancipation. No! This is why the architecture of late-stage capitalism is so devoid of soul, why it's so cheap. It aims to make you uncomfortable, it aims to alienate you from the comfort of a creative and nourishing environment, remove you from the thought that an alternative even exists. This is about people being immersed in creative and thought-provoking environments. I think it's clear corporate design is lifeless and it's not going to get better from here. But if these environments were in the hands of materially supported, healthy, and happy workers who were given the ability and opportunity to earnestly and creatively explore the design of these environments, that would be beneficial for us all. Our surroundings affect us. The only thing stopping us from these environments is corporate greed. They surround us in a cold world, but we deserve more. So again, why would anyone want to spend time in an arcade that's designed to look and feel like a city in squalor? How could this be a place you want to go to have fun, to relax with friends and family? Well, because there's an alluring power in creative environments, but that alluring power can become corrupted if we don't encourage the media literacy necessary not only for parsing what's simulation and what's not, but parsing what's intended simulation and what is not intended simulation. Unfortunately, people will often forego learning about the poverty of those Chinese people in Kowloon walled city in exchange for an immersive and fun time playing arcade games at the expense of those impoverished, subjugated people. An even deeper added element to Kawasaki Arcade is that it was built in Japan, a country which itself, like the British, had also colonized Hong Kong in the past. We have to disconnect what theming is from the preconceived notions of what Western society has determined it to to be. We can't believe Disneyland represents America. We can't believe Animal Kingdom represents Nepal or Africa. We can't believe Kawasaki Arcade represents Kowloon Walled City. At least, not until those who create these simulations prove they can be trusted with them. And what's the use in creating immersive, creative environments if the world around us outside of those environments doesn't represent that same richness of fulfillment? Otherwise, it's just simulation. It's just theming. We want something more than just the facade. We need something more than just eat your burger and shut up. Immersion.